You, girl, he said finally to Pansy. Fetch water. He held the larger cup out to her. Pansy limped and moaned so as she edged closer to him that Grayling snatched the cup herself. She found her way back to the muddy brook and returned with a cup of water. Sylvanus's chants grew louder as he took the cup with the cheese from the fire, protected his hand with the hem of his gown, and poured its contents into the larger cup in a stream, making loops and coils on the surface of the water. There was a sizzle as the hot cheese met the cold water, and then silence. Sylvanus poured the cooled cheese onto the ground. The shape of the cheese has taken will tell us what we need to know, he said. It looks like a lump of cheese, Grayling said. Sylvanus frowned at her. I must concentrate, he said, and he studied the cheese from all directions. He broke off small bits, rubbed and smelled them. Indeed, he said finally, a lump of cheese. What means that? Asked Grayling. Does it tell us who is behind this evil smoke and shadow? It tells us it is a lump of cheese. A lump of cheese, Sylvanus shouted. The cheese is useless. Do not fret, Sylvanus, said Old Nancy, patting his arm. Leastwise, now we can eat it. She used Sylvanus's knife to cut a large section from the rounds of cheese for each of them. Then their bellies were full, and their lips still blue from the berries. They lay beneath the trees on beds of fallen leaves and fern fronds. All was silent but for Sylvanus, now and then muttering, lump of cheese. Grayling felt Pook leave her pocket to feast on seeds and crumbs of cheese on the ground. Satisfied, he groomed his whiskers, and with a sigh crawled over her skirt and settled in her pocket once more. She smiled. What little time it had taken for her to become attached to him. A mouse. At home she would have chased him from the cottage with a broom and a curse, but here she patted her pocket tenderly before she fell asleep. In the morning Grayling sang her way forward, and the others followed. The woods here were different from the woods in Grayling's valley. The air was damper, the ground wetter. Ancient moss-laden oaks rose from thick carpets of ferns, and willow branches, laden still with mist, trailed nearly to the ground like the long sleeves of a wedding dress. Downed trees supported young sprouts whose roots arched around the logs, seeking the ground. Nurse logs, said Sylvanus. They give life and support the young trees. In truth? Grayling asked him. In truth. And there truly is such a thing as soothsaying with cheese? Most certainly, said Sylvanus. The world is full of things most peculiar, she said, and things most astounding, young Grayling, most astounding. Why, in places in this world are snails so big folks can live in their shells. No, Sylvanus nodded so heartily that crumbs of cheese flew from his beard. Aye, and to the west are islands, where men have the heads of hounds and go naked in all types of weather, and another where people have horses' feet. Would you not like to see these places? No, I only want to go home, Grayling said at once, but men with horses' feet? That she would like to see. From time to time the wind blew through, icy and sharp, and then subsided, leaving the air thick and heavy. Grayling found breathing difficult. Her lungs hurt from the effort, and her steps grew slower and slower, but she sang on as she walked. As they ventured further, there was no path, but Grayling lurched and stumbled as she forced her way through, tearing her bodice and scraping her arms as the thorny bushes. Old Nancy and Desdemona Cork followed, but Sylvanus and Pansy hung back, jostling to be last in line, snarling at each other like two ill-tempered but cowardly dogs. They pushed through to a sort of clearing, foreboding and dark with dread. Here the trees were thinner and blackened, the ground scorched as if by fire, charred wood and ashes crunched beneath their feet. Even Sylvanus's spotted mule was ill at ease. Eyes round with fear and nose speckled with foam, he began to back away, and Sylvanus had to urge, wheedle, and pull him forward. Grayling heard the sound of something moving just beyond, something large moving slowly, smoothly over the ground. The air was dense with the smell of smoke-scorched wood and something unidentifiable, acrid and sharp and bitter in the nose. Then came a gibbering and a groaning, a howling and hissing, from nowhere and everywhere, reverberating. Grayling covered her ears, and the sound was inside her, pounding and echoing. She grabbed old Nancy's hand and stood as if frozen, and her companions lurched into her. Gliding toward them was a horrid creature, all scales and flames and teeth. "11. A huge snake, big enough to swallow a man whole, slithered into the clearing, its black-scaled body rippling and throbbing, coiled around itself. Its eyes flamed red, and opening its huge mouth the snake hissed and howled and breathed fire. Flames turned trees into torches and sizzled as they met patches of mist and dew. There came great fluttering in Grayling's pocket, and Pook burst forth a raven again. With a harsh cronk, a squawk, and a clapping of wings, he soared into the sky and away. The mule had made a sound between a whinny and a grunt, and ears flattened, bolted, saddlebags swinging. The snake flicked its tail and coiled it around Grayling, pulling her close and squeezing her breathless. A harsh odor burned her throat and stung her eyes. She struggled to breathe. Twisting and wriggling, she fought to free herself, but the snake held her tight. She could do nothing. Pansy and Desdemona Cork had run away, but Grayling could see Sylvanus rubbing his beard and mumbling incantations, and Old Nancy poking the snake's middle with her broom and screeching over and over. Whether it was due to Sylvanus' magical intervention or Old Nancy's battering, Grayling did not know or care, but the snake opened its mouth, flicked its sharp tongue, and loosed its coils. Bruised and sore, seeking the serpent's stink. Trembling with terror, Grayling turned and ran with Sylvanus and Old Nancy back into the thicket of trees, where they caught up with Pansy and Desdemona Cork. Together they tore out from the trees onto a path that twisted and turned on its way back to the road. Finally, when they heard nothing behind them and the whooshing sound of the fire and the crack of the branches snapping from the heat, they stumbled to a stop. Grayling doubled over, trying to catch her breath. Her face smarted and her legs trembled. Old Nancy dropped to the ground, her head drooping. Pansy pulled at the old woman's sleeve, pleading, "We must go! Up! Up!" Although Grayling, too, was eager to put distance between herself and the monstrous snake, she knew Old Nancy did not have the strength to rise and run farther. And the day was growing dark. They could not see to flee or to hide. Desdemona Cork helped Grayling gather enough fallen leaves and bracken to make a bed, and hungry and cold and frightened, the 5 travelers huddled together like kittens. It was dawn when Grayling woke to Sylvanus, saying, "'Tis important to note that the serpent has not followed nor threatened us. Certes, those flame were a threat," said Desdemona Cork, her face grey beneath her blue markings. She stood, brushing leaves from her veils and shawls and skirts. "'Tis foolish to put ourselves in such danger. I am away." Old Nancy said, "Desdemona Cork, you cannot think to be on the road alone, not with the smoke and the shadow on one side and that terrible creature on the other. 'Twould not be safe. We must stay together." "And do what?" Desdemona Cork asked. She looked up the road and down. Grayling could see the pulse pounding in the enchantress's throat. Shaking her hair and her skirts, Desdemona Cork sat down again, and Old Nancy took her hand. "Now, Sylvanus," said Old Nancy, "what meant you?" "I mean, I believe the best is there, but to keep us from the grimoires. We will come to no harm unless we try to get closer. I was in the snake's grasp," Grayling thought. "Certes, I felt that the creature meant me harm, and I have the bruises to prove it." She shivered at the recollection. "We are here because the grimoires may tell us what to do about the evil force," she said, "and my mother's grimoire is through these woods. We must get closer." Her legs ached and her head hurt, and she wished to be anywhere else. "But how can we ever get past such a creature?" "Alas, we cannot," said Sylvanus in a voice hollow and forlorn. "Thus we leave it for some master magician to come and—" "I thought you were a master magician, Sylvanus," said Old Nancy. "The others are rooted to the ground. There must be something you can do." "Nay," said Sylvanus, blowing his nose. "Alas, alas, I cannot." "My mother and all the others," said Grayling. "Are we to just leave them spellbound? Let them turn completely into trees? What will happen to the world if all the witches and wizards and cunning folk are helpless, and all the power rests in the evil force?" She rubbed her ash-smudged face with her sleeve. "You say how charms and conjuration. What use is your enchanted scholarship if you can do nothing?" said Sylvanus. "Wise men say, when your foe breathes fire, 'tis folly to be brave." A brisk wind set tall trees to groaning, dead leaves swirled around Grayling's feet, and the cries of the foxes and the badgers echoed through the woods. Pansy clung to Old Nancy's skirts, and no one made a sound but for the thumping of their hearts. Grayling was afraid. She studied the others. Sylvanus Vetch, teacher of enchanted scholarship at the school in Nether Finchback, he too was afraid. Old Nancy with her bluster, skittish Desdemona Cork, faint-hearted Pansy, and Grayling herself, all afraid. Grayling cast about for some way to embolden them. "What would Hannah Strong do?" "My mother," Grayling said at last. "It's a heartening song, and I believe we are in need of one now," and she sang loud and sweet and true. You cannot just sit here dreaming and hoping, march forward to battle with pennants unfurled. I call on your courage, no fretting or moping. Stand tall, stand tall. If we stand alone, it still must be done. If it must be done, we are the one. And you, and you, and you, she sang, gesturing to each of her companions. And me, Grayling thought with a shudder, and me. The words of the song settled softly on their hearts like snowflakes, and they were cheered. Enough fussing and dawdling, said Old Nancy, clapping her hands. I shall attack this creature with thunder and lightning and send him scuttling in fear like a lamb fleeing a wolf. She stood, smoothed her skirts and her wimple, turned back the way they had come. If I do not set myself afire first. The others stumbled behind her, down the road, over the blackened ground, and through the charred and shriveled trees. They approached the clearing with steps that grew slower and slower, while the others took cover behind a tree. Old Nancy stepped forward. "Hi, Snake," she shouted in a shaky voice. She cleared her throat and began again. "Hi, are you there? Show yourself." There was no response, and she turned with a shrug to the others, and then with a cracking of branches and crunching of bushes, the snake slipped into the clearing. Grayling vowed she could hear a heart pounding wildly in every chest. Even the serpents. The great snake opened its mouth, hissed and howled and spit flames. Grayling heard the whoosh of flames, the crackle of branches of fire, and the cronk of a raven, as Pook, she thought it must be Pook, tore through the blazing branches and soared into the sky, his tail feathers aflame. Old Nancy backed up a few steps, lifted her broom, and began to chant, "O spirits of the storm, let fire meet earth, let a storm spring forth, and shafts of fire come down to assault our enemy and strike him low, so might it be." She muttered and murmured, swaying with her eyes closed and broom pointing to the sky. "May my power bring lightning, may my anger bring thunder, open skies and rend clouds asunder." Suddenly the sky turned dark and thunder cracked. Lightning split the air and splintered trees, bringing branches crashing to the ground. Sparks flared and sizzled, scorching Sylvanus' gown and Pansy's hair. Flashes of lightning lit the clearing. Thunder rumbled and roared. Grayling had pulled her cloak over her head and did not peek out until the commotion had ended. She was grieved to see the snake still there, massive and scaly and untouched by old Nancy's lightning. It coiled its quivering body, swished its tail, and let loose a ghastly hiss. The company fled back into the woods. At a safe distance, old Nancy, face red and hands a-tremble, dropped to the ground. "I cannot direct the lightning truly enough to strike the beast, but I know nothing more to do." Grayling felt her face sag like an empty feed-sack. She turned to Desdemona Cork, but the enchantress shook her head. "I have had no practice enchanting monstrous serpents, nor do I wish to learn. I say we go elsewhere." "Sylvanus," said old Nancy, with Pansy hiding behind her skirts, "I challenge the creature, and though scorched, I still stand. Might you not try?" Sylvanus' face paled with fear, but Grayling took his hand and squeezed gently. Pulling his cloak tightly about him, he moved again toward the clearing, the others trailing far behind. He narrowed his eyes and glowered at the creature, which blew fire. Grayling near choked in the ash and cinder-filled air. Sylvanus hastened back toward the trees where the others waited. "'Tis well known," he said, "that a true magician casts spells and curses at a distance, preferably a great, great distance." He said "ah" and several times, scratched his nose, and rubbed his beard. He peeked from behind a tree and stared at the serpent for long moments. He muttered and swayed, cleared his throat, and hummed. He lifted a pine branch, still smoldering, and shook it in the beast's direction. "Foul creature from the depths of the earth, beast of fire and doom, may you vanish, retreat, exist no more," he intoned. Grayling peered around Sylvanus. The snake was still there. With another shake of the fiery branch, Sylvanus called, "May you become as small as a drop of rain, a grain of sand, a humming-bird's eye, the elbow of a flea. May you become so small you become nothing at all, and trouble us no more." The snake was still there. Its serpentine body quivered and sparks flew from its mouth. Sylvanus rubbed his nose and rumpled his hair. "That was my finest dematerializing spell. Defeating monsters is not my expertise, I fear. I can do no more." His magic was as useless as old Nancy's. Grayling's belly clenched like a fist. Had the serpent defeated them? Was their journey over? No, she told herself, no. Grayling studied the snake carefully. "Sylvanus, look! 'Tis odd, but the creature has changed some." She went a little closer. "I can almost see through it, as if it were made of a fine, thin cloth, with something moving behind, a shape here, a shadow there." Sylvanus looked. "Aye, 'tis strange," he studied the beast. "I expect that this creature is not a serpent at all, but a glamour, and my spell has caused the glamour to thin." Grayling shook her head in puzzlement, so Sylvanus continued. "There be three kinds of serpents, serpents by nature, serpents by spell or curse, and serpents by glamour. A magic spell turns a person into a serpent. A glamour spell makes a person appear to be a serpent, but in truth he is not. 'Tis but an illusion." An illusion? The coil squeezing her hand had felt very real. Can a glamour spell be overturned? Someone must be brave and determined enough to reach a hand through the glamour and grasp the one bewitched through the beastly guise. "Be you certain, Sylvanus?" asked old Nancy. "It sounds too easy." "Easy, you say again? Easy?" Grayling spit and sputtered. "Easy for you, perhaps, who does not have to put her hand through a scaly, hissing creature." For Grayling knew it must be she. She had grown fond of her companions, well, not Pansy, but did not think any of them brave and determined enough to approach the monstrous serpent. Was she? Could she risk the snake's crushing grasp again? Her heart was racing and her palms sweaty. And although she wanted only to run away, she went a little closer and looked up, up, up. The serpent opened its mouth and flicked its tongue, but spat no fire. Breathing heavily, Grayling stepped closer and closer yet. Slowly she reached out a trembling hand and touched it. She felt the leathery scales, the muscles beneath, and then her hand passed right through and met the solid warm flesh of a hand grasping hers. Startled, she jumped back. The very air quivered, the ground shook. A great hiss rose from the creature, which twisted and thrashed. Flames blistered her nose and singed her hair. A shower of ashes, another deafening hiss, and the snake disappeared. And there in its place stood a boy, nay, a young man, strong of arms and shoulders, but pale as if he had spent his life indoors, with hair and eyes of honey brown and a smile, thought Grayling, bright enough to warm a winter night. Grayling fell back, her mouth agape, and her companions cried out in dismay. Who was this fellow? Was this another sort of glamour that made a hideous serpent appear to be a pleasant-looking man, so that it could get close enough to crush them? I am relieved to be released, but confused and stupid with not knowing what has befallen me, the fellow said. Shall I thank you, fair mistress, for freeing me from this monstrous guise? Or was it you who cursed me at the start? Nay, Grayling answered, not I, but we came upon you. I must confess I much prefer you in this condition. Who are you? Phineas Moon, he said with a small bow, apprentice paper-maker from Wootton Magna, at the end of the great stony road. He gestured past the trees. Returning from delivering a load of paper to the stationers' guild in Leicester Beamish, my bladder was so overburdened I stopped to let my water go. A great noise came, and I felt the earth shake, with a voice thundered, Be you now guardian of my house, and all that is in it. Let no one pass, or you shall be serpent evermore. The company was struck dumb, but all but Pansy, who moved to the young man's side. That was impressive, was it not? She said with a smug smile. I did labor long to word the spell just right. Spell, Sylvanus sputtered. You useless lump of a girl! Have you been meddling in magic? Irk, said Pansy, and then irk! The girl was trembling with rage. Do not call me a lump or useless. I could tell you, I have done— She stopped. Her eyes were dark and cold, and she clenched her lips together. Pansy, child, awed Nancy asked, what have you been playing at? Pansy backed away. Her face was ashen. Her cheeks flamed. I am not a child, and I am not playing, she shouted. I have more power than you thought I did. I played the fool and you laughed at me, but I have surprised you, have I not? You did not know I had such skills. My mother did not know, but hearken to me. I took your grimoires and rooted your cunning folk. I placed a glamour spell on this boy to guard the grimoires. You never suspected me, but I did it. Me. She put her hands on her hips and smirked in triumph. There was such silence that Grayling could hear her heart beating and the anxious twitching of Desdemona Cork's skirts. Her belly grew hot with anger. Finally, old Nancy darted forward and grabbed Pansy's arm. Why, Pansy, why have you done this? I wanted to know what you others know, so I took the grimoires to learn. And I planted the cunning folk, she shrugged. I did not want to kill them, but prevent them following me. Old Nancy scowled and said, Spiteful, careless girl, you do not deserve the power you have. My power, I found, has limits. Pansy shook her head. I conjured the force that comes as smoke and shadow, but it has grown ever more powerful, larger and fiercer and harder to control. I did not know what it would do next or to whom, and I feared I might be in danger. You seemed to have a plan, so I struggled to keep the force away, although it weathered and sickened me. I wanted you to succeed, so I would be safe. Why was I spared, and Sylvanus and Desdemona Cork? Old Nancy asked. You? All of you with no grimoires, no real magic, and little power? I did not bother with you, thinking you no threat. Sylvanus spluttered again, but old Nancy waved him silent. Where did you learn such spells? Your mother never taught you to be so selfish and careless, she said. How soon? Asked Grayling, her voice tight with fury. Can you undo the damage you have caused? And, added Phineas, retrieve my horse and wagon. They all looked at Pansy, who shook her head. I can do nothing. 'Tis grown too strong, overwhelming my spells, taking the grimoires and guiding them fiercely. 'Tis a mighty force now, and I am empty and drained and so tired. She took a long shuddering breath. Her lips trembled. We may all be planted ere long. Sylvanus scowled at her. You forgot the third rule of magic. Do no magic you cannot undo. Old Nancy grabbed Pansy by an ear. Stupid, greedy, malicious girl! I will shake you until your bones turn to butter. She shook the girl roughly. Then I shall send you back to your mother and tell her what you have done. Another shake. That you are thoughtless and dangerous and a disgrace to your family, and another. That you should be sent to be a dung-heap tender or assistant pig-keeper. Huzzah! Sylvanus broke in with a shout. Huzzah, I have but now realized that cheese was not useless. The lump of cheese pointed to this lump of a girl. I just did not understand. Yes, I knew it. 'Tis a true soothsaying cheese. His face fell into disappointed folds. But now we have eaten it, and it is gone. Alas, alas, true soothsaying cheese, and we have eaten it. As Grayling watched and listened, the heat of the anger rose from her belly to her face. Her hands itched to thump Pansy until she bellowed, certain that thumping Pansy would not help, for they might yet need her at good will. Grayling closed her eyes and breathed deeply, soothing herself with dots of moonlight, lavender wands, and sorrel soup with dumplings. From somewhere behind them came an unearthly sound, a sound between a bellow and a bawl, a sound of menace and pain and despair. Grayling held her breath, prepared to face another snake. Sylvanus shouted, Nostradamus, and ran toward the sound. What was that magic word he shouted? She wondered. Why hadn't he tried it on the serpent? A rustling of the trees startled her, and she turned to see. The branches parted, and there was Sylvanus and his mule. Nostradamus didn't run far, said Sylvanus, beaming at the mule, and now he is with us again. Only his mule. Grayling shook her head to clear it. The snake, the smoke, the shadow, Pansy's confession, they had left her most jittery, now that the clearing was serpent-free. Grayling gathered wood, and Sylvanus built a fire. Desdemona Cork sat beside Old Nancy and gently rubbed the old woman's aching knees. Phineas Moon studied them all in bemusement. Pansy came to sit among them, but the others turned their backs, and she slunk off the slunk alone. When the fire was blazing, the company warmed their toes as they emptied the saddlebags that had returned with Nostradamus and the remains of the ham, bread, and onions. Grayling jumped to her feet, shuddering. Some vermin was crawling up her arm. Spider, rat, flea, 'tis the Pook, Grey Eyes, said a small voice, and there he was, pink nose, pink ears, and more whiskers than any mouse truly needed. Has that horrid creature gone? He twitched his tail, charred at the end with the flames that had found the raven. Aye, Grayling said, truly gone, and you are come back safely. She settled back down by the fire, and the mouse curled against her neck. This Pook should not have abandoned you, but it is difficult for a startled raven to stay in a pocket. Pook twitched his nose. Might there be a crumb of something to eat? Grayling gave him a bit of bread, which he nibbled before climbing into her pocket. She heard a tiny sigh and then a tiny snore. Was that mouse talking? Asked Phineas Moon, his voice quivering with alarm, suspicion, disbelief. Grayling had forgotten that he was newly come. Aye, he was, she said. A mouse, but how? Grayling told again the story of the mouse and the potions, and now whenever he be fearful or excited the shape-shifting takes him. He finds it thrilling, he says, but confusing. Phineas Moon stared at her, his mouth hung open, and his eyes were wide as dinner plates. Who are you folk? He asked at last. A lady of surpassing loveliness? A mischief-making girl with powerful magic? A weather charmer? A bearded wizard? A talking mouse? And you with the courage to face a hideous serpent? So Grayling had begun with from the very beginning, with her mother calling to her. He listened and nodded until she finished. Sylvanus lit a pipe, and Grayling smelled dried mint, sage, and angelica root. Until you, I had not met someone glamoured to be a snake, Sylvanus told the young man. Could you feel it happening? Did you know how you appeared to others? I felt a little different, a bit queasy and dizzy perhaps, as if I had overdrunk of honey mad, but little different except that I moved as if through soup. A thick and warm soup, my granny's dried pea with bacon perhaps. Phineas Moon licked his lips at the memory. Even my horse bellowed with fright and ran, the cart bouncing after him, and my companions fled. I looked into his scream and saw, oh, how very different I was. I wished I could run from me also, he shivered. I am no beauty, I know, but to be horrid, repulsive, and all thanks to this meddlesome, irksome girl. He glowered at Pansy. She glowered back at him. I could likely class to glamour again, she said, so I suggest you stop calling me names. Pansy was cruel and malicious, said Old Nancy. We will teach her to use her skills wisely, Sylvanus and I, or she will be put to work in the nether Finchback laundry, washing the socks of the adolescent magicians, said Sylvanus. The second most important rule about magic is to know when not to use it. We shall attend to that anon. Pansy frowned. The fire took to smouldering and smoking, and Old Nancy coughed deeply as the smoke circled her head. Black clouds, ashweed, begone from me, she shouted, waving her broom. A small shower of rain fell and cleared the air. She sat back, satisfied. Grayling stirred the fire and added small twigs and branches. The fire settled down, and so did they all. I don't suppose, asked Phineas Moon, if any of you can conjure me a horse, I must get back to the city. He looked around. No horse appeared. No, I feared it not. 'Tis afoot for me. What awaits you in the city? Asked Old Nancy. A blanker? A tailor? A lover? Paper, he said. Fine paper that I make myself. He stretched his hands out before him. My hands tingle, longing to feel again the slippery rag slurry that dries into paper. That, too, is a sort of magic. My paper is unequalled in the kingdom, heavy, soft, creamy, and thick. His eyes grew dreamy. Paper not to be used for registers or accounts or lists or provisions. 2 pounds of flour, a tub of pig fat, and a turnip. No elegant paper that should be saved for royal decrees, sacred texts, or here he looked at Desdemona Cork. Love letters. Desdemona Cork twitched her shawl, and Phineas Moon blushed. Grayling rolled her eyes. Can you not leave it for a moment? She hissed to Desdemona Cork. Must you enchant everyone? Desdemona Cork pulled her shawls tightly around her. 'Tis not something I do, but something I am. Why, then, are you not something useful? Grayling asked. Why are none of you useful? What value is there in your magic, if you can do nothing with it? She roared in frustration. Where was the help she had expected from the others? Sylvanus snapped his fingers, and spring flowers bloomed on the branches of the autumn-brown shrubs. A rainbow appeared in the darkening sky, and tiny winged creatures flew by. Grayling looked closely. Lambs. There were tiny winged lambs. Useless. No wonder they had not been rooted like the others. Even Pansy had thought them not worth the effort. Anger formed a sour knot in her throat as she curled up to sleep. I have heard the grimoire again. 'Tis just past there, Grayling said next morning. She gestured to where the woods were thick with great green spruces and firs, bare-branched rowans and oaks packed tightly together, tangled with ferns and brambles and briars. Her body taut with apprehension. Grayling led the others farther into the woods. The power that Pansy had conjured, the power that now defied her, would be destroyed or destroy her. Grayling felt suddenly chilled. After a time she stopped at a break in the trees. Up a rugged, bracken-frosted rise was a great stone house, towered and turreted and spired as if trying to touch the sky. "My mother's grimoire is inside," Grayling said. "Mayhap all the grimoires are there. Since the serpent is now but a bumbling boy, and no longer guarding them, they are unprotected. Could not someone fetch my mother's grimoire?" There was a silence, but for Phineas's Moon's muttered, "Bumbling? How you say bumbling?" "I hear no one proposing to go after it," Grayling sniffed. "Should not perilous adventures have a hero to face any dangers?" The woman looked at Sylvanus and Phineas Moon, who looked at each other. No one spoke. "I have been the most wary and unwilling of us all," thought Grayling. "How did I become leader?" But she was. She sang. The grimoire sang back. "'Tis in there, indeed. With my mother's grimoire, mayhap we can discover how to end this bother at last." "In truth," said Pansy, "there are no answers or assistance in your mother's grimoire, or anyone's. There has not been such a force before, so there will be no remedies in the grimoire's pages. I knew this when we began to follow your grimoire's song, but I didn't want you to stop trying because I didn't know what else to do." Old Nancy, Desdemona Cork, Sylvanus, and Phineas Moon were all struck dumb. But Grayling, her temper as frayed as her skirts, shouted, "All this for nothing? This exhausting journey for nothing? When we might as well have stayed warm and dry and fed and sought another solution? Pansy, you are worse than malicious. You are wicked, a very devil. I preferred you when you were timid and quiet," said Pansy. "Muzzle up," said Grayling. "This all be your fault." "Why is she still here?" asked Desdemona Cork, pointing at Pansy. "Why do we not send her away?" "I have promised my niece to watch over her girl and keep her safe," said old Nancy. She shook her head. "It appears that the only danger to Pansy may be from herself. Still, though I have promised, we need not keep company with the girl." "I am here," said Pansy. "Talk to me, not about me." "Do I hear a gnat buzzing?" asked Desdemona Cork. "Clod-pated fools," Pansy said in a mumble as she stalked away. "Pansy may be useful yet," old Nancy said, "and she cannot do too much harm while we are watching her." "If what Pansy said is true," said Grayling, "and there are no answers in the grimoires, what then shall we do, old Nancy? Desdemona Cork, Sylvanus, Master Magician?" All shook their heads, weary and disheartened. They sat, leaning against the trees. Grayling stormed away, disturbing Pook, who jolted out of her pocket and landed a goat. Somewhere near was the sea. Grayling could hear it and smell it. She knew the sea only from songs and stories, but she could see it in her mind, grey and vast and wild, surging and churning. That was just how she felt, such turmoil within her. She could swallow it no longer. She followed the sound through a thicket of young oaks and over a rise, and there it was, not as she imagined it, but wilder and fiercer, more magnificent and more immense, the waves racing in to put her mind of great frothy beasts attacking the shore over and over in endless battle. The wind, a clean wind, with no trace of smoke or shadow, blew through her hair, lifted it, and danced it furiously upon her head. As her exhilaration turned to rage, she let out a great howl. All this way in these days and all their efforts, and still they were powerless against the smoke and shadow, shadow and smoke, smoke, smoke! She paced many moments in thought before heading back to the others. Pook, the goat, bleated at her return, twigs sticking out of between his large yellow teeth. Old Nancy, Desdemona Cork, and Sylvanus were sprawled on the ground, but where was Phineas Moon? Perhaps he had already gone back to the city. Well, indeed, Grayling thought, we have no need of him, good for nothing but gawking at Desdemona Cork. She cleared her throat and said, "Do you recall, old Nancy, clearing the smoke away from all that small rain shower?" Her companions nodded. "I do wonder if a little wet freed us of the smoke. Might not a lot of wet extinguish a lot of smoke?" There was a silence as her listeners struggled to understand just what she meant, and then "Aha," said old Nancy. "Indeed," she went on, lifting her broom. "I shall call up rain." Sylvanus stroked his beard. The girl may have the right of it, but rain would likely be too scant. To banish the demon of smoke and shadow would require a great deal of water, and no way to avoid it. "I was thinking," said Grayling, "of the sea." "The sea, the sea," the others murmured as they looked at her and each other. "We have followed my mother's grimoire all this way," said Grayling. "The force was summoned to gather the grimoires and guard them. Although Pansy's gatekeeper had been removed, the force must guard them still. If we find some way to take my mother's grimoire, will the force not follow to retrieve it, as it was created to do?" The others looked at each other and bobbed their heads in agreement. "We could then throw the grimoire into the sea. Smoke will pursue it and be extinguished." "Might that be an answer?" "It might," said old Nancy, "but 'twould be most dangersome." "No matter, I, Phineas Moon, shall find the grimoire for you, and hurl it into the sea," said the young man, returning with the load of wood in his arms. "I would be the hero of this adventure." Grayling shook her head. "Nay, you cannot sing to the grimoire, nor hear it singing back." She looked at frail old Nancy, with her aching bones, sweetly scented Desdemona Cork, with her frivolous enchantments, and white-bearded, wise but ineffectual Sylvanus. Though they each had a portion of magic, the grimoire would sing to none of them, only to Grayling, only to her. "I fear it must be me," she said. As Phineas Moon started a fire, the others nodded somberly. Who else indeed? "I must," she repeated to herself. "I must." though every part of her wanted to run, to hide, to disappear. Instead she curled herself near the fire and tried to sleep. A biting cold wind arose from time to time, but whether it was natural or a sign that the forest was protesting her plans, Grayling could not say. Grayling watched the sky lighten from murky dawn to the bright blue of a fine autumn day. The sky should not be blue this morning, she thought, but cloudy, dark, and ominous. She stirred the embers of the fire and sat beside it, reluctant to face what was to come. One by one the others woke, stood stretched, until only Desdemona Cork still lay on the ground, curled around herself like a puppy. She raised her head. "I am sore afraid," she said, "for myself, for Grayling, for us all. This is nothing I can enchant away." Old Nancy dropped creakily down beside Desdemona Cork and took her hand. "What if she does not succeed?" Desdemona Cork asked. "What if we are all rooted? I can almost feel my skin harden into bark." She shuddered. It proved serious in their plight, thought Grayling. The bold and bossy Old Nancy who mistrusted enchanters, bringing a measure of comfort to Desdemona Cork, who no longer arrogant, assured but doubtful and in need of solace. Grayling inhaled deeply. She would do what she could, for her mother, for the other rooted folk, for those in peril. Taking the sleeping Pook, once more a mouse, from her pocket, she asked, "Will one of you safeguard Pook while I am occupied?" Phineas Moo, with a small smile, reached for the mouse. Pook, however, would have none of it. "Nay, mistress," he said with a squeak, "this mouse shall go with you." "Ah, you are still compelled by the binding potion," said Grayling. "Perhaps Sylvanus can counteract it." "Mistress Grey-Eye," said Pook, "in truth the binding potion can wore off long ago, but still this mouse will go with you." He clambered up into Grayling's shoulder and settled himself against her neck with a soft huff. Grayling's heart grew warm. Mice were not known for their loyalty, but here was Pook facing danger with her and for her. Loyal as a mouse, that's what people should say. Sylvanus muttered some words over Grayling and sprinkled her with mint leaves to bring good fortune. Old Nancy struggled to her feet, joints cracking and creaking. "Have a care, child," she said as she soothed Grayling's hair in her skirts. "See you don't trip as you run, and come right back if the deed seems too fearsome." Pansy bid Grayling no farewell, nor wished her well. She but watched silently from behind a tree. Grayling climbed through the bracken and up the rise. She heard a howling in the distance that set the back of her neck a prickle. Was it wolves, the sea, the wind? None of those betokened anything good for her. She climbed on, but her heart beating frantically. The day grew cold and sunless, and the wind began again to blow. It howled a bit and bellowed. Dried leaves crackled and scurried along the ground, and seabirds screeched like wild-haired hags about the fire on All Hallows Eve. Tall evergreens bent so that their branches swept the ground. The very earth shook. A blast of wind like a massive hand pushed Grayling back. Her hair tangled and her skirts swirled. She stumbled and fell, righting herself with some effort. She bent into the tempest and followed the path until the house loomed right before her, its walls streaked with moss and darkened by damp. A tall wooden door, hanging from rusted hinges, banged in the wind. It whined on its hinges as it pushed wider. Inside it was dark and dank, for the high, narrow wind slits let in little light. The very stones in the wall, slimy with the damp of centuries, exuded cold. She could feel the chill right through the thin and tattered soles of her shoes, and her breath spun clouds. Grayling shivered, but not just at the iciness. Evil chilled her like the frost of a winter night. Her belly cramped with fear and revulsion. "What is it I feel? Is the force here?" she asked out loud, her voice echoing in the emptiness. She stroked Pook softly to comfort him, or maybe herself. "Might you, my Pook, shift into something huge and menacing to frighten it away? You well know, Grey-Eyes, that this mouse cannot choose the time or manner of the shifting," Pook said, "but a mouse is good at scampering and sleuthing unseen. Put this mouse down, and it shall see what is here." She dropped him gently down, and he ran off, slipping on the slick stones of the floor. Grayling wrapped her arms about herself to stop her shivering. The room seemed large but empty of people and furniture of life. She called "Woohoo! Woohoo!" to hear it echo, but stopped with a gulp. "Blast, but I am a goose," she said in a frightened whisper, making it easy for me to be discovered. Taking a deep breath, she sang to the grimoire, and hearing it sing back, smiled in relief for a moment. The grimoire was indeed here, and it knew her. Away from the entry hall, the darkness was so deep that she had to feel her way through the house. The walls were damp and sticky, and she stopped often to wipe her hands in her skirt. Through a doorway here, Step up here and down there, hallway there, blank wall there. She moved slowly, following the grimoire's song. One dark, cold room followed another. Grayling grew dizzy with the turns and turnabouts. From somewhere behind her came the moaning and wind gathering. A sudden blast of icy air slammed her against the wall. Grayling struggled to flee as the wind battered her face and sucked out her very breath. "Why don't you just root me like the others?" Grayling shouted in defiance. "Or leave me alone." She ducked and shoved her way through. But where was she? The air grew yet colder and darker as she tripped and fell over something. Books, many books. She examined them in the dim light from the slit window high in the wall. Grimoires, higgledy-piggledy, here and there, grimoires in tottering stacks, big and small, some thick with pages, some as thin as a maple leaf, silk-covered and leather-covered and bound between rough skins. There must be near 100, Grayling thought. She never knew there were so many cunning folk in the kingdom. Where the tick-ticking of the needled nails, Pook skittered to a stop. "'Tis the grimoires, Pook. This mouth does not know what is a grimoire. 'Tis a book of spells and songs and recipes." Pook shook his soft gray head. "This mouse sees only piles of paper, marred with ink and not good for eating. You silly mouse, this is what we are looking for." But something evil had settled on the grimoires like dust, and she was loath to touch them further. Likely the evil force would fight to retrieve any grimoire she took. Should she take the time to search for her mother's, or simply lay hands on the nearest one? Nay, she thought, who knows what curse or protective spell has been laid on another's grimoire? I must find our own. She sang as clear and strong as she could, and the air above the grimoire shivered and glistened. Grayling listened carefully. "'Tis here," she said, with a small smile of relief, and she sang again. Here she plucked a book from the pile and recognized it as her mother's, the faded blue cover marked with a burdock leaf in the circle. As she pulled it toward her, she felt the chill of a shadow behind her. No time. Pook, go back to the others, go back." She ran through the house. Twisting and turning, she feared she would never find her way out again. Finally she glimpsed light from the open door, and she hurried out. Lightning flashed here and there. Thunder shook the ground. Where was the path to the sea? She burst through the holly thicket behind the house, and there below was the sea, enormous, powerful, even monstrous. The crashing of the waves was like armies meeting. She held the grimoire to her as she raced helter-skelter, followed by the thrumming of a force, churning up smoke and shadow, heat and ice, freezing branches and shrubs, scorching her kirtle and her hair. Her breath came fast as she tripped and stumbled down the steep, treacherous path, over the pebbly shore, onto wet and slippery rocks that reached out into the water. The sea was so vast, she was so afraid. Smoke and shadow howled up the path behind her, her eyes and nose filled with smoke. Icy hands clutched her face, her neck, holding her, pulling her back, enveloped in dark and cold. Grayling was overtaken by despair. She could not escape. It was all over. But still smoke and shadow behind and above and all around her. She made one last effort and plunged into the sea, into the water which closed over her. The sea water was bitter cold, salty on her lips, and stinking in her eyes. After her plunge to the bottom, she drifted there, quiet, at ease. Was she dead? The water was above her and around her, embracing her, enfolding her, cradling her. It was so lovely, so peaceful, until her chest tightened, and her lungs began to burn. Which way was up? Which way was air? She paddled wildly. Her skirts billowed and snagged her legs. Her hair tangled in her eyes and her mouth. Her struggles took her at last to the surface, where she gulped great gulps of air. The sea-water she had swallowed roiled in her belly, and spewed out like a fountain. No, she was not dead. She felt too miserable to be dead. She closed her eyes and bobbed gently in the water, while a sea-bird screeched above her. A sudden splash near her proved to be Phineas Moon, who had hurled himself off the rocks. He caught and held her. "Let me go," she shouted, batting his arm. "You are pulling my hair. Stop fighting me, and let me help. I am rescuing you." "Nay, let me rescue myself." They struggled to a beach, where they lay wet and gasping. "Fee and fee again, Grayling," said Phineas Moon. "You were supposed to throw the book into the water, not follow it in. I had no choice. The smoke and shadow and I, we were one, tangled together and not separable." She shuddered, feeling once more the foul cloud, icy and afire at the same time that it enveloped her. The bird continued its screeching, accompanied by frenzied shouting from the cliff above. Grayling lifted her head to see. There was old Nancy and Sylvanus, calling and waving and bouncing with glee. Dust upon a cork, wrapped in her fluttering shawls, pointed to the sky and cried, "Look there, look!" Grayling looked. A great stream of birds poured from the rise where the stone house was, birds of different sizes, different colors, strange birds with no beaks or wings. Nay, not birds, books. "Phineas Moon, 'tis the grimoires," Grayling cried. And it was, large grimoires and small, old and new, artfully wrought and plain, more than 100 grimoires, sailing through the air and on. What does it mean? Phineas Moon stood and craned his neck to see better. Belike they are flying back to their owners. He clapped his hands and laughed. "I think you have done it, Grayling. You have broken the spell." A smile lighted Grayling's face, and the joy rose within her. "And their owners? Might this mean they are too released? With a shrug, Phineas Moon said, "I am not the person to ask. Perhaps old Nancy could say, or Pansy." He took Grayling by the arm. "Come, I'll help you back up. Certes, you will allow me that." Grayling, queasy, tattered, wet, but lighter of heart, nodded, and Phineas Moon led her up a steep but straight path to where the others waited. Old Nancy, twittering in a most un-Old Nancy-like way, grabbed Grayling's arm and held her close. Sylvanus and Desdemona Cork danced delightedly. Pansy stood alone at the edge of the group and glowered. "Here, come warm yourself, girl," said Sylvanus at last, chuckling with concern as he pulled Grayling closer to a welcoming fire. Desdemona Cork removed Grayling's sodden cloak and wrapped her in a shawl of fine wool woven in stripes of gold and the silvery blue of the sea. It had a sweet, exotic, spicy smell, spring flowers and fresh apples with a touch of cinnamon, and Grayling buried her face in it. Warm wine on a cold night. She breathed deeply. They gathered about the fire, Grayling safe and warm between Desdemona Cork and old Nancy. "Is the force gone now?" Grayling asked, when she had settled herself. "Is the horror over, and as well as it had been before? And my mother and all the wise folk released?" "By meddling and magic," said Sylvanus. "Pansy opened a door, and evil has come through. There may be more surprises in store, but for the moment I would say some trouble is over." Phineas Moon came and crouched near Grayling. He took a drenched and dripping book from beneath his doublet. "I saw this sinking as I jumped into the water, and I was able to take hold of it." Grayling reached for the sodden grimoire. "Soft, soft," he said, holding it away. "The pages are soaked and fragile, and the ink is smeared in places." He placed the book in Grayling's lap. She opened the grimoire and for the first time saw inside. Here was a recipe for her mother's rosehip jelly. There were the ingredients for a love potion. Grayling examined page after page, a chant to find lost sheep. Songs for healing and comforting and cheering, careful drawings of the leaves of deadly nightshade and monkshood root. Grayling had learned much of this lore by watching and listening to her mother. What Pansy had wanted to know so desperately that she had conjured the smoke and shadow was not in these pages. There was no sorcery, no mysterious secret, no magic here. "If you please," Phineas Moon continued, "I will take it and repair it." He took it gently into his big hands. "Most pages need only to dry. The others I will have recopied on my good paper. Creamy, thick paper, smooth to the touch, but strong and altogether splendid." He smiled at her. "Just as you are." Grayling smiled back as she studied him, his eyes warm and deep. Hair a soft brown, the very air around him seemed to shimmer. "Oh, figs and feathers, he's an enchanter," she whispered, and shook her head violently to break the spell. "Nay," said Desdemona Cork, "he is but an ordinary young man. 'Tis his gentle kindness that shines." Grayling gawked at Desdemona Cork. "I thought you did not notice us ordinary folk," said Desdemona Cork. "I am learning." The scream of Seabird interrupted. Was it Pook, Grayling wondered, or was he still a mouse? Had he come back as she had ordered him? If not, where was he, and what was he? It was difficult keeping track of a creature that changed its nature so frequently. Grayling looked at Pansy across the fire. Firelight made shadows on Pansy's face, which was not stupid and sullen as usual, but sly and malevolent. Had she done something else wicked? Pook, if she had hurt Pook, Grayling what would she do? It would be something severe and horrid. "Where is Pook?" Grayling asked. "I am here," said the mouse as he scrabbled up her arm. "'Twas long away for a mouse to come. I hurried as fast as I could, but my legs were short and my heart is little, and now I am here, and you are safe." With a contented huff he climbed into Grayling's pocket, damp though it was, and settled in for a well-earned rest. Weary and hungry, the company dozed by the fire. When Grayling woke, the sun was setting over the sea, splashing streaks of pale oranges and golds and tinge of lavender across the sky where it met the horizon. The air was rich with the smell of salt and seaweed. Phineas Moon had gathered clams and mussels and periwinkles from the shore. Sylvanus pried open the shells with his knife. Desdemona Cork rinsed them in sea-water. Old Nancy wrapped them in sea lentils and cooked them briefly on the hot coals. Grayling gathered berries and wild celery. It was not much of a supper for six, for they let Pansy share, but it did taste good. "We must leave here," Sylvanus said, through a mouthful of berries. "We must see whether our deeds have truly broken the spell that damage has been done." "What if nothing has changed?" asked Grayling. "What if the grimoires have flown off, but people are still rooted? What if the force did not dissipate in the sea, but is still there, and Pansy cannot call it back, nor can you?" Sylvanus wiped his mouth with his beard. "Soft, girl, soft. Don't fall off the cliff until you get to the edge. We can see what we'll see." "That is the worry," thought Grayling. "What shall we see?" In the morning Phineas Moon bade them farewell. He would be going north along the seashore while the others walked east, back the way they had come. "How will I recover the grimoire?" Grayling asked him. "Sing to it, and follow it. It will be waiting." With a wink, a grunt, and a whistle, he was off, headed north. Grayling watched him go, her heart suddenly sore. Soon the others would be leaving also. She was at last free to see about her mother, but she could not imagine her days without them. Stumbling and limping, the remaining travelers pushed through the woods, up hills and down, over ditches and fallen logs until they came to a road. The walking was easier then, and the company had gone some ways when a small open carriage with a noble crest on the door came behind them on the road. Desdemona Cork tossed her hair and twitched her shawls, and the carriage stopped. "What about your cottage by the sea?" Grayling asked. grabbing Desdemona Cork's arm. Goat cheese and apples, remember? You can stop enchanting and bake bread. She untangled a leaf of wild celery that was stuck in the enchantress's cloud of hair. I am what I am, said Desdemona Cork. She flashed Grayling a smile of rare loveliness, and Grayling felt again the pull of the woman's power. Grayling unwrapped the gold and blue shawl from around her shoulders and handed it to Desdemona Cork. Nay, keep it, said Desdemona Cork. Think on me from time to time, wind in my hair, spinning by the sea, no matter what I will not be there. She climbed into the carriage, which continued on its way, blowing a great dust storm in its wake. Those left behind coughed and rubbed their eyes. Old Nancy, angry, lifted her broom. We shall see how enchanting she be with rain in her face. Grayling took her hand. You rain like your anger, Old Nancy, will fall on all of us. Old Nancy grumbled, but put her broom down. Two were gone now. Grayling would never smell sweet blossoms or feel the soft sun on her face without thinking of Desdemona Cork. They began again to walk away from the sea, away from their adventures toward home. Pansy dawdled behind the rest and whined. Sylvanus, I want to ride the mule. My feet are blistered and sore tired, and my head hurts. If you hadn't wearied yourself with the devilment, you would not be tired out now. Sylvanus called to her. Pansy opened her mouth to speak, but Sylvanus silenced her with a wave of his hand. I will not burden him. Nostradamus has a far way to go to Nether Finchback. Pansy dragged and shuffled her feet, but finally caught up with the others. Tell me more of this place, she said to Sylvanus. Nether Finchback, his eyes unfocused, as if he were looking far into the distance and back into the past at some time. Nether Finchback, a glorious institution of learning and spelling and necromancy, where mystery and manifestations of brilliance share the day with sheer befuddlement. I long to be a powerful magician, said Pansy. Take me with you. Nay, never, said Sylvanus, shaking his head. Leastwise, not now. You have much to learn before you can be considered for Nether Finchback. You will go with old Nancy for the learning of it. Nay, said Pansy. Sylvanus frowned at her. 'Twill be worth the effort, girl, to achieve mastery and power, and a thoughtful nature. After all, an empty head makes noise but no sense. Pansy was silent, though her face was stormy. The day was cold but sunny. The clouds made pictures in the sky and then passed on. Grayling and old Nancy now lagged behind the other two, for old Nancy's weary bones slowed her down, and Grayling was often gawking at the four bedraggled strangers with the mule. But none stopped to engage them. Had any of them been rooted to the ground and then set free? Grayling wondered. Or were the trees at the roadside more than they seemed? Long past noon they reached a crossroads. We part ways here, Sylvanus said. I must make certain the evil is past and all that is was before. Pansy grabbed Sylvanus' sleeve. Take me with you. I have skills. You have seen them. Teach me to do great magic. Sylvanus pulled his arm away. Nay, I said. I have seen your skills, overcome by emotions you could not control. Your envy, greed, and anger burst forth in the power of the smoke and shadow, and you endangered us all. Old Nancy has much to teach you. I do not want to learn, I want to do. And that is the primary reason you go with old Nancy. Pansy's face crumpled. And you, Sylvanus said to Grayling, you have proved yourself clever and brave. Nay, I was most fearful, for I knew I had no magic to help me. Sylvanus whistled to his mule. Only the very stupid do not fear danger, he said. As for magic, the great wizard Gastronomus being of happy memory, said true magic is like a sausage. Old Nancy and Pansy listened intently, while Grayling's jaws dropped in befuddlement. Sausage? How sausage? Made of bits and pieces of things everyone has, not pork and spices, but tricks and charms, aptitudes and powers, some herbs, some skills, some training, some luck. He tightened the straps of the saddlebags on the mule, and Nostradamus grunted. The world is full of mystery. Not everything can be explained. Does that make it magic? You could sing to the grimoire with no words and no music and hear it sing back. How? Was that magic? Was it in you, in the song? Or does it speak of a bond between you and the grimoire? Sylvanus pushed a wisp of hair from Grayling's face. And there is a magic of sorts in your courage and your keen wits, the songs you called upon, and your caring heart. Grayling sniffed. Whatever skills she had were not at all awesome and astounding, not what she would call magical. She could not command smoke and shadow, or shroud a boy in glamour spell as Pansy had, but Pansy's magic just caused trouble. Did magic always bring trouble? Would having magic be worth being as irritating and vexatious as Pansy? How was it, Sylvanus? Grayling asked him, that you know nothing of the smoke and shadow and the damage it caused when we found you? I was elsewhere traveling, said Sylvanus, partaking of the pure aether there beyond the moon. Grayling rubbed her forehead in suspicion. Aye, you have the right to it, in truth, he said. I knew of the smoke and shadow, and I had concluded that the force's magic was so strong it would not be defeated by more magic, but might feed off it and grow stronger. The force would not be vanquished, I determined, only through courage, cleverness, imagination, good judgment, and good sense. I waited for someone with those qualities, for you, and you proved me right. Grayling looked at him in wonder. I do have some useful skills, Sylvanus told her. The school at Nether Finchback does employ me merely for my handsome face. Now I must go. Sorry, does not employ me merely for my handsome face. Now I must go. He dropped a handful of copper coins into Grayling's hand. Fare these well, lass. Perchance we might meet again." He touched his hand to his head in a salute, and he walked off, leading the mule away, leaving Grayling and old Nancy and Pansy to go another. Grayling called to Sylvanus, "You never told us what is the first rule of magic." He spun around and called back to her, "'Tis the hardest rule to learn. Magic is not the answer. Magic may be convenient, brilliant, even dazzling, but it is not the answer." He waved once to her before he turned and walked on. 15. Grayling dropped the coins into her pocket, and Puck thrashed and grumbled in irritation as they landed on his head. Eager to see what awaited her, she turned her feet toward home. Where the road was rocky, she trod carefully, for the soles of her shoes were as thin as poor man's soup. On paths smooth and soft she hurried her steps. Though she felt ever so weary, old Nancy, grown fine and thin and feeble, struggled, her shoulders slumped and breath ragged, and a sullen pansy lagged behind. Puck slept most of the time in Grayling's pocket, snoring small mouse snores. Their adventures had tired him too. Days dragged on, but soon the world around her began to look familiar, and her heart leaped. She had admired that church, fancied that cottage, run from those dogs. It seemed lifetimes since they had passed this way. She had expected to be joyful and relieved after the defeat of the smoke and the shadow, but her mind was uneasy and her humours disordered. Her steps grew slower and slower as they passed the remnants of the silk pavilion flapping in the autumn breeze. They were near to the crossroads where the metal-nosed warlord had accosted them, and though travellers were plentiful on this stretch of road, Grayling's belly tightened with dread. To calm herself, she imagined the difficulties the man must have, sneezing his nose off, blowing a nose rusted in the rain, kissing Lady Metal-Nose. She tried to laugh at the ridiculous images, but even as a daydream, his face frightened her. So she thought of even more pleasant things: misty mornings, smell of mint leaves brewed in hot water, robins in the spring, cabbage cooked with apples, yellow cheese and sausages, and warm dark bread. She turned to share this with old Nancy, but old Nancy was a ways behind, sitting on the roadside with Pansy beside her. Turnips and thunderstorms, Grayling muttered in annoyance as she retraced her steps. "Leave me, girl," said old Nancy. "I am weary in my bones and can go no farther." "Via, you know I would not leave you here," Grayling said. "Sit and rest those weary bones a while, and I will join you, for if my feet could talk, it would whine and complain and beg for rest." She drooped down beside the woman. Pansy's belly rumbled a loud rumble. "My belly is empty all the way to the ground," she said, "and these legs can go no more. There be an inn up this road. I saw it when we passed in the wagon of the warlord. Can we not spend some of Sylvanus's coins on bread and mayhap a bed?" Grayling shook her head. "Nay, we may yet need them." Pansy crossed her arms. "You sound like my mother. I have no need of another mother. I need supper." Dark clouds moved over them, and rain began, whispering through the trees and pocking the ground, water dripping from her hair, her nose, her fingertips. Grayling turned to old Nancy. "Old Nancy, we are discomfited enough. Would you not stop the rain?" Old Nancy shook her head as she lifted her bedraggled broom. "We no longer have the power, my broom and I. Showers turned to downpour." Old Nancy sneezed, and Grayling said, "Oh, drips and drizzles, it's the inn for us." The three were soggy and chilled when they reached the inn on the outskirts of the town. Inside it smelled like wet clothes, stale ale, and Grayling sniffed. Mutton stew, fragrant with garlic and pepper. Old Nancy dropped into a bench at a table near the fire, while Grayling bargained with the innkeeper, a large young man with a missing teeth and his broad smile. Returning to the others, Grayling said, "I have secured us bread, beer, and stew. There are no beds to be had, but we are welcome to sleep here by this fire." Old Nancy brightened a little. But where was Pansy? In the dim light of the inn, Grayling saw the girl speaking with two men near the door. "Pansy," Grayling called, "you complained of hunger, and I can hear your belly rumbling from here. Come and have supper." Grayling found that her weariness made even a wooden bench comfortable enough for sleeping. Rain pelted the roof, and the wind wailed as she closed her eyes, but it was near dawn when she awoke. The innkeeper was feeding great logs to the fire, and he winked at Grayling. "I shall warm some ale for you, for 'tis a nasty morning indeed out there." Grayling nodded her thanks and left the inn to relieve herself. Her hair tangled in her cloak whipped about her as she trudged from the inn and back, cursing the wind. But this wind did not blight her spirits or extinguish her will. Certes, then, it was mere wind, wasn't it? Pansy and old Nancy were stirring when she returned. "The rain has stopped," she told them, "although the wind is fierce. We shall not have easy walking today." "No matter," said Pansy, looking pleased with herself. "I sent word last night to the man with the metal nose, Lord Mandrake is called, that the witches he sought before are here." Grayling lurched forward and grabbed Pansy's arm. "What? Pansy, what have you done?" Pansy took off Grayling's hold. "I wanted to do magic, and if Sylvanus will not teach me, I will go to Lord Mandrake." Grayling shook her head. "Pansy, he will cage you as he did before. I will gladly trade my freedom for power. With practice my magic will grow stronger, and folks will cease their poor pansies and foolish pansies, and be in awe of me. He cannot be trusted, nor can I. We will make a fine pair. But you have ensnarled us. Think on it. I have no magic, and old Nancy has exhausted hers. What will happen when your Lord Mandrake finds that out?" Pansy shrugged. You will think of something. Sylvana says you have courage and keen wits." Her voice was sharp-edged and her eyes hard. Grayling had endured Pansy long enough. Let her go as she willed, as long as she was far from Grayling. "We must be away without delay," awed Nancy. Grayling helped her to her feet. "Before the warlord comes." In a voice ragged and weary, awed Nancy said, "Pansy, you have learned nothing from this misadventure, but we are even more foolish and wicked. Do what you will." She took Grayling's arm, and they moved toward the door. "Go then," said Pansy. "I will be powerful magician, rich beyond your dreams, and you will come to wish you had stayed, and been kinder to me." Grayling and awed Nancy pushed the door open and stumbled out. The day was cold and sunless, and the air smelled of snow. The wind howled, and the tall firs swayed like grasses. Broken branches littered the road, so that Grayling and awed Nancy had to leap and skitter and stay afoot. "Fir cones and fiddlesticks! 'Tis past time to be home," Grayling thought as she pushed awed Nancy faster and faster until darkness fell once more. "16. In the morning Grayling found frost on her nose and her eyelashes. The air was filled with a noisy honking of geese, and she studied them as they passed overhead, how easily they moved and how much faster the human folks on foot. Grayling recalled persuading Pook the raven to stay on the ground where it was safer, watching the geese, their undersides flashing white and gray. Grayling thought that she might have been mistaken. How would the world look up from there? How could she see from the sky that she had never seen? Were she a bird? Would she choose to stay on the ground or soar, no matter the danger? She knew that she once had said, but now she was not so certain. The memory of Pook the raven moved her to take the mouse from her pocket and juggle him awake. He opened his eyes and snuffled, with bits of acorn still adorning his whiskers. "Mistress Grey Eyes, do you wish the assistance of?" He yawned a great yawn. "That is great for a tiny creature like a mouse. This Pook—" Grayling stroked his head gently. "I've been thinking 'tis a long while since you shifted into another shape." Pook said in a faint, thin voice, This mouse will likely not be taken with that again. I believe this Pook. It's only a mouse now." "But a very special mouse," Grayling whispered. He coughed in a tiny cough. "Are you quite well?" "Aye," he said, "but weary, most weary." And he slipped back into her pocket. A late autumn market provided biscuits and pears and soft, sweet cheese in exchange for the last of Sylvanus' coppers. Bellies full, they walked on slower and slower as the morning grew later. The cold sun was high in the sky, and they neared the spot where they were to part ways. "We must each set out for home now," awed Nancy, "or we shall freeze into statues here on the road." Grayling wrapped her cloak more tightly around her. "'Tis still a goodly walk for us both." Awed Nancy dropped to the ground, broom in her lap. Grayling gasped, "Awed Nancy, are you ill?" "The fingers of giants are making shadows in the sky," awed Nancy said. Grayling looked up. "What mean you? I only see bare branches against the grey." "Of course, tree branches." Awed Nancy shook her head. "It appears my bones and my wits are both failing me." As she helped awed Nancy struggle to her feet, Grayling felt her heart near pulled in two. She was most eager to be home, but she could not leave awed Nancy to travel home. With a sigh that she pulled all the way from her toes, Grayling said, "Come, we have walked all this way together. I will not leave you now. I shall see you home." She tried to remember if her mother had a staying alive song. Such a song was called for now, but if Hannah Strong did, Grayling did not know it. Their footsteps beat out a sort of tune, and words came into her head, and tune and words came together in a melody, with the old woman leaning heavily on her. Grayling began to walk, singing the song she was inventing as they went. "Be strong, look around you. Blue asters are blooming, the yarrow is tall. Apples and sweet pears are yet on the tree, the wide world calls. Take my hand, winter will come soon. Your nose and your cheeks will pink with the cold when frost paints the walls, and footsteps sing crunch songs to snowdrops and crocus. In spring you'll be walking in fields newly white-capped, with Margaret daisies, and geese winging home honk their calls. Summer will sizzle and warm your old bones as you lie in the meadow and look forward to fall. Stay alive, awed Nancy, for living is all, full of promise and friendship. Take my hand, take my hand." "Hannah Strong is indeed a fine one for making songs," said awed Nancy. "I vow I feel stronger." "I most sincerely hope so," said Grayling, "but that is my own song that I just now made, and none of my mother's." "So you have her song skill as well as her wisdom and her strength?" Grayling nodded. "I do, it seems to do." They climbed up and down through woods chilly and damp, rich with the smell of mushrooms and decaying wood. In places Grayling saw small trees standing on their roots as if on tiptoe. Awed Nancy followed her gaze. "The nurse logs have rotted away," she said. "The young trees need them no longer and grow on their own." "On their own," Grayling nodded in understanding. The day wore on, and finally they saw the smoke from the many hearth fires. There, backed against a hill, was a village. Awed Nancy sighed, and her face grew calm. "My heart is lifting now I am near to my bed," she said. She directed Grayling to turn here and there, and no, not that path, this path. They kept to the edge of the village. Those passing by bowed their heads to awed Nancy, but Grayling could smell an uneasy stew of fear and awe and need. The very trees whispered, "Weather witch, weather witch." At the far end of the village was a stone hut with an arched wooden door painted green. Inside the hut was draughty, cold, and damp, but bearable once Grayling found the tinder box and started the fire. Smoke found its way around the room and out the smoke hole in the roof. "Smoke yet frightens me," Grayling said to old Nancy. "Only the foolish have no fear. There is much in this world to be fearful of, but much to bring pleasure if we have our wits about us." Old Nancy groaned as she lay down on a thin pallet near the fire, which Grayling fed with twigs and seed cones dry enough to burn. She turned on the remains of the biscuits and the cheese, and old Nancy directed her to a crock of cider with 2 mugs. Grayling joined old Nancy in her pallet, and they supped. Old Nancy reached out and gently touched the scar that remained on Grayling's cheek. "You bear here a remembrance of our journey," she said. "Old Nancy," Grayling asked, "tell me truly, do you think 'tis over? That the wise folk are themselves again and not rooted to the ground? Now that the force is vanquished, and all will be well, though Pansy is gone to the warlord with her hurtful magic? I do not know, but I have hope. Hope is excellent, a necessary thing to have in this world. Hope and bread and good friends," she sighed in satisfaction. "Now I am home, girl, and my belly full, and I think I just might live." "Indeed, I think you might, and ere long you will have your weather magic back and again be able to cloud pusher fog mistress, she who controls the rain." Grayling paused a moment to frame a question, and then asked, "What does magic feel like?" Old Nancy stared into the distance. "Using magic is like flying a kite. You think you are in control of it, but then the wind catches it. It tugs and then shoots away like an arrow released from a bow." As it had done for Pansy, Grayling thought. Sylvanus Day's true magic is like a sausage made of bits and pieces of things we all have. "Aye, true. Magic be a paradox, everything and nothing," said old Nancy. "Pansy has skill and real power. Not everyone has such. I do not. Pansy's is a powerful, greedy, wicked sort of magic. You too have skills." Old Nancy yawned and stretched. "But even better, you have good sense and a caring heart, sharp eyes in your head, and the wits to use them, no matter the magic she has or learns. Pansy will never have that." Grayling nodded. It was enough. Pook climbed slowly out of Grayling's pocket and scoured the floor for crumbs and seeds. With a squeak of contentment, he climbed onto the pallet and settled down next to her to groom his whiskers. The next morning Grayling prepared to begin her walk home. She wrapped and dusted him on a cork's shawl around old Nancy's frail shoulders and tied it tight. "I am reluctant to bid farewell to you, for I have grown fond of you and your grumbles." Old Nancy smiled and said, "And I you. You have cared for me most tenderly." She took 2 wrinkled apples from a green bowl, wrapped the last biscuits in a large crumbs of the remaining cheese in a cloth, and gave the bundle to Grayling for her journey. Grayling gave the old woman a quick hug. "Pook," she said to the mouse, who was cleaning his paws with a tiny pink tongue, "we must be off. 'Tis a long walk to my valley." Her heart gave a little flutter. With a squeak and a sigh, the mouse said, "Mistress, this mouse is wearied from the travelling and quite elderly for a mouse." He coughed once and continued in a weaker voice, "This mouse would stay here." Grayling was surprised at the rush of sadness and loss she felt. "Are you certain? What shall I do without you?" "Ah, Grey Eyes!" His voice grew faint and feathery, and he shuddered. Her eyes burned. How could she leave him behind? They had been through so much, and she loved him. A mouse, and she loved him. She swallowed hard and said, "Then farewell, Pook. You are a prince of a mouse, a wonder of a mouse, an entirely splendid mouse, and I shall miss you terribly," she thought with a snuffle. Pook had turned aside for a fit of cleaning and paid no attention to her, continuing to groom his paws. He looked different, quite mouse-like. Grayling bit her lip and looked away. The mouse was a mouse now, and Pook no longer. She wrapped her cloak around her, took her bundle, and set off alone in the morning mist. "17. The road ran ever on, through hills and fields, meadows and valleys, past towns and villages. After 2 weary days and frosty nights, Grayling woke with empty belly but full heart. Today she would be home. The sun was rising, and she climbed up the hill that she had once walked down. Here she would hear the jabbering song of a starling, although the bare-branched oaks, alders, and maples warned. Autumn is warning. Make ready for winter. She made a song to sing along. Seasons change, winter's nigh. Leaves change color, fall and die. Seasons change, wet and dry. Even wise folk wonder why. Everything changes by and by. Humming, she reached the rise where she had slept that first night, and thought once more of Pook, safe and warm and well fed with old Nancy. Grayling patted the pocket where she had carried him to the sea and back. "Never," she whispered, as though she could hear her, "never did I think I would miss having a mouse in my pocket, or a goat by my side, but I do." Still down from this hill was her mother. Her mother whole and out of danger, she hoped, or her mother growing into the ground, or her mother a tree now, but still her mother. Grayling's heart thumped in anticipation as she headed into the valley. She peered through the trees, trying to catch sight of the cottage, or at least what part of it survived the fire. Faint remains of the smoke scented the air, and Grayling imagined the ruins would be broken like teeth upon the ground, but as she grew nigh, she felt dizzy with joy and relief. There was the cottage, much as it had been. Small to be sure, but solid and sturdy, roofed with freshly laid thatch. The walls were repaired with oak timbers and patched with woven stick wattle under daub of mud, dung, and straw. And there was her mother, no roots, no branches, no leaves, her mother, Hannah Strong. Grayling smiled so wide it hurt her face, and her half stumbled half danced down the path, her hair flying and her cheeks burning. "Hannah Strong," she shouted. "Mother, I am home." The woman turned. Her daub-spattered kirtle hung loosely, and her hair peeping out from her kerchief was grey. Had her mother changed so much in the past fortnight, or had Grayling not noticed her aging? But grizzled or not, the woman was not a tree, and her legs ended not in roots, but wide, strong feet. "Well met, daughter," Hannah Strong said, thrusting a handful of sticky daub at Grayling. "Take some of this and help me. I wish to have solid walls before the snows come." Grayling put her hands out without thinking and accepted the heavy, soggy heap. "Where is the grimoire?" asked Hannah Strong. "'Tis part of my story. Shall I tell it? Do you wish to know what I found, what I did, and how it was that you are no longer rooted to the ground?" Hannah Strong waved by her a muddy hand. "Pish! There are mysteries aplenty in this world, and I have not time to question them all. But it was my doing, and—" Hannah Strong pushed the Grayling toward the cottage wall. "Tell me when daylight has faded. Go and be useful." Now she was home and faced with Hannah Strong. Grayling felt childish and insignificant again, as if the past weeks had not happened at all. But they had, and she had much to tell. "I expect my story can keep," she said, as she spreaded the daub upon the wall. "But do say how the cottage has been made whole again. It can be only a short time since the spell was broken and you were freed. The Taylor twins wanted my remedy for wind in the bowels, and the price was to prepare the cottage frame. Goodwife Stock needed a love potion, so she helped me weave the wattle, and you can see what Thomas Thatcher paid for relief of his griping gut," said Hannah Strong, gesturing toward the roof. She slapped another handful of daub on the side of the cottage and spread it thickly. "We must finish the plastering soon, for there are salves and potions to be mixed, brewed, and bottled." Grayling stopped, daub dripping from her hands down her skirt. "Indeed, your salves and potions were lost or gone with me." "What, then, did you give to the goodwife Stock and the others?" "I made do with," said Hannah Strong. "I had herbs and spells and fresh water, ashes and berries and songs, and I am quite adept at persuasion." Grayling smiled. Her mother's magic was indeed like a sausage. Day darkened to chilly evening as they daubed the cottage walls. Finally they cleaned their hands and took shelter in the unfinished cottage. The room was smaller than Grayling remembered, empty and cold and lacking the chairs and tables and shelves and supplies that had made it home. She built a small fire with bits of charred wood and tinder and warmed her backside. Hannah Strong had wrapped a parcel of cheese and brown bread and a jug of sour ale. Grayling raised an eyebrow and queried. "Simon Strand, the innkeeper," said Hannah Strong, "wished a tonic to sweeten his mother-in-law's disposition." Grayling sat and nestled close to the hearth. "Tell me now," Hannah Strong said as they ate. So Grayling began with the mouse who ate the potions, and sinking in the towns, and the woman with the wart. "And you can guess," she asked, "who heard me singing and came to me." But her mother was asleep, but it rained that night, and the roof was tight and the walls nearly so Grayling was dry and almost warm. She thought of old Nancy, who could stop this rain if she wished. If she was rested and her belly was full, Grayling was stuck with a sudden yearning to see her, which she had close to, until she too slept. She dreamed of hissing serpents and woes with a start, but the sound proved only the hissing of the damp wood in the fire. She was home. She turned with a huff and slept again, dreamless. In the morning they finished the remains of the cheese. Hannah Strong said, "The brown clay pot. There is some cracked from the heat of the fire, but will likely serve. Go and gather bilberries and thistle, bayberry bark, and the roots of wet yellow dock. It's still in the garden, and we will brew healing tonics. Certes, there will soon be problems that cannot be eased with chancing mint and persuasion." She added more wood to the fire and blew it to the greater flame. Grayling wrapped her cloak around her, took the brown clay pot, and went outside. The rain had stopped. She searched the shriveled herbs outside for what was yet alive and useful. There she sat, resting her weary body, and her blistered feet, and fell asleep there in the garden. The day and the next passed, filled with some labor, a bit of food, and welcome sleep. Grayling felt strangely restless and dissatisfied. Something was missing, something Grayling needed to feel safe and content as she used to. The valley had longed for. She seemed somehow empty and forlorn. What was happening in the world outside? Was the metal-nosed warlord still brewing disorder? Was Pansy trying out more selfish magic? The third morning she woke early and left the cottage weary of the smell of charred wood and fresh daub. It was too cold for bird-song, but she heard her water gurgling through the small round rocks in the pond, and she began humming along. For a moment she imagined she heard the grimoire singing, and she stopped cold. For many days she had sung to it and heard it sing back, but lately she and the grimoire had been silent. She missed the song, the tug and the promise, and the satisfaction of having something important to do and the others to do it with. Taking a deep breath and hoping, Grayling began to sing it as faint as the whoosh of a butterfly's wing. She heard the grimoire song. Whenever Phineas Moon and the book were, no water lay between them and Grayling. She sang again for the pleasure of hearing the grimoire, sea-soaked and far away, sing back. While Hannah Strong smoothed another coat of daub on the cottage walls, Grayling searched for what was available and edible. She gathered rose hips and ripe plums and dug for wild garlic. There were withered pears on the tree and shriveled blackberries. Once inside, Hannah Strong brought out the heel of a bread. Such a supper reminded Grayling of meals on the road, and she remembered the lovely Desdemona Cork with the sun and moon inked on her face. What did she do now? And old Nancy and Sylvanus and Phineas Moon? Did they think her and sigh as she did? The music of raindrops on the cottage roof moved Grayling to make a song, but instead she fell to a tired sleep. That night she dreamed of flying goats and singing cheese and men with horses' feet. Next morning Grayling caught sight of her mother, who was out gathering sticks and twigs for the fire. "Sit, mother," Grayling said, and her voice trembled. "You must listen. I have things to say, and it's time to say them." She cleared her throat and began again. "Stop working, sit, and listen. I have seen much, and lived much since I left you, and I was changed by my adventures." She smiled with a remembering. "My story has a serpent, magician, soothsaying cheeses. I was brave at times, and I discovered many things I can do and know." Without protest, Hannah Strong wiped her hands clean on her kirtle and sat down on the firewood stack to listen. As Grayling told her story, she wondered again that she had the courage to leave her home and face such dangers. Hannah Strong nodded her head while Grayling spoke. "Aye," she said when Grayling finished, "I have heard whispers and rumors that other cunning folk were rooted as I was, and now have been freed. Grimoires taken and now returned. And that was your doing? I considered that I must do to free you, and I did it. I expect you were surprised to hear that." "Not a bit," said Hannah Strong. "I never would have sent you if I had not known you could do it." "Truly?" Grayling felt her cheeks grow warm with pleasure and surprise. "You never told me that. I did not think it needed telling. You did what must be done." I did. But even as she said it, Grayling realized it was not true. They had done it, all of them, together. She pulled out a loose thread of her tattered skirt. Just this one thread is not as strong as a woven cloth, she thought. A person striving with others can be stronger than she would be alone. She had never thought of that before. She was swept along with longing for the others. Hannah Strong slapped her knee and rose. "Enough. It was a good journey and a good story, and now we must hurry and make ready for winter. When rain and snow fall, I would have us be safe and content within." She studied Grayling and said, "Wise women learn when they are ready, and I believe your journey has made you ready. I will share my spells with you and teach you more of my songs and everything the wise woman's daughter needs to know." A soft breeze blew into the valley. It reminded Grayling of the sea breeze, and she took a fine deep breath. The world seemed to grow wider in ripples, as if she, Grayling, were a pebble thrust into a pond. The whole world swirled in circles around her. She knew not what would come of it, and felt such a yearning that she could not withstand it. Tucking a sprig of bright red holly berries in her hair, she smiled. Grayling hurried back into the cottage for her cloak and out again. She found a stout walking stick and looked up the hill she had so recently come down. Hannah Strong's shoulders sagged as she watched the girl. "I knew from the moment I sent you to save me that this day would come, but so soon I cannot say. I trust you find the others to help you boil and brew and learn your songs. I may be the wise woman's daughter, but I have my own song to sing." Grayling put her arms around her mother. "I will fetch your grimoire from Phineas Moon, and I will see it returned to you. Nay, girl, I believe 'tis yours now." From mother to daughter over generations, her mother, not one for hugging, yet hugged Grayling back. "Farewell, Hannah Strong," Grayling said. "Farewell, daughter." In her clear, true voice, Grayling sang her new song. "Seasons change, winter's nigh. Leaves change color, fall and die. Seasons change, wet and dry. Even wise folk wonder why. Everything changes by and by." She stopped for a moment and then nodded and added a last line. "Seasons change, and so do I." Then Grayling turned for the path and back up the hill toward the rest of the world. Thank you for listening to Grayling's Song by Karen Cushman. Let me know what part of it you may have liked. There are a few added things here, kind of. There's an author's note. Talking about a few different things that are historical that kind of tie in with it. And then there's a sample of Catherine called... No. Actually, yes, I think it is. Catherine called Birdie at the end is referenced. Not referenced, sampled at the end of this, since this is an ebook. But anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading it again. I read it last year for the second time, and I was reading it while walking, and I still kind of feel like you have to get into a certain speed with it. So, I'm sorry, I know that I read it, certain things so fast, but certain things feel like they call for it. Remember there is always there is a setting on YouTube videos where you can actually select a speed and slow videos down if you need to. But anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.